Hi and welcome back to the channel. Ernie Kovacs once said that television is called a medium because it was neither rare nor well done. That was in the 1950s and TV was a new medium at the time. It's interesting, if you're interested in this sort of thing, to look at the history of television and see the way it changed over the decades. So in between Ernie Kovacs and now, American television did a lot of different things. It nurtured talents who later became known for their movies. It gave gigs to actors and other creative people after the Hollywood studio system self-destructed. And yes, it was hampered by the censorship of the age, which we now can view as evidence that powerful men tried to keep the proletariat infantilized. But you were never going to see an adaptation of the Threepenny Opera on primetime with Mary Tyler Moore playing Pirate Jenny and Dick Van Dyke as Mac the Knife. However, genre works did make their way onto the glass teat. Between 1969 and 1975, the ABC TV network had something called Movies of the Week, which punched way above their weight for the time and place in which they were made. ABC pumped out 24 of them a year, roughly one every fortnight was being made over those 6 years. Some of the movies were backdoor pilots for television series, others were standalone high-concept ideas. At the time, ABC was running third in the ratings to NBC and CBS, so they needed a winner. The movies of the week were made on small budgets, usually around $350,000, which wasn't a lot of money even at that time. This week I've been diving into a rabbit hole of ABC TV movies of the week when I found a couple while looking through my budget box sets in the cavern of movies, and I found two that seemed interesting and one I already had plans to look at. One's a horror movie, one's a private eye backdoor pilot for a TV series that never happened, and the third is a science fiction movie. This little piece of backwoods horror has a lot going for it, and it fails. It has a script by Richard Matheson, which is one of the pluses. It has some competent, if not career best, direction by Dan Curtis, who later gave us things like The Night Strangler, The Norless Tapes, and one of the most beloved TV movies of the age, Trilogy of Terror. The IMDb strapline for Scream of the Wolf says, "A big game hunter comes out of retirement to help track down a killer wolf and begins to suspect that it isn't a wolf but an animal that can take human form." The movie stars Clint Walker as Byron Douglas, a big game hunter with ideas about hunting, fear, and the human condition that is so Darwinian, Ernest Hemingway would have kicked him in the nuts.
Only in mortal danger are we alive, John. Only by risking our lives can we truly appreciate what kind of a life are you leading now. Emasculated by society and safety.
It also has Peter Graves as John Weatherby, a retired hunter turned writer who was once a close friend of Byron's. As the townspeople are attacked by something which walks on 4 feet, and then on 2 feet, and then disappears, Weatherby, along with the local sheriff played by Philip Carey, investigates the murders. Helping them out is a local store owner, Sandy, played by Joanne Flug, whom I really like because she does a lot of coffee making. There's also a man called Grant, played by Don McGowan from The Creation of the Humanoids, who lives in Byron's house. The murders and the mystery behind them grows. Byron and John have several kinds of pissing contests, including an arm wrestling challenge. John wants Byron to help him hunt down the wolf, but Byron thinks it's a good idea that people are scared because it shows them they're alive. The question here is it a wolf, is it a werewolf, or is it something else? This movie could have been a lot more interesting than it was. According to Richard Matheson, who was interviewed about it a long time after the movie was made, Scream of the Wolf was supposed to have an homoerotic subtext between Byron and John, and that their form of friendship was particularly close. Now that would have been really interesting. The problem, according to Matheson, is this. Peter Graves and Clint Walker were the wrong guys for the roles. They looked right for hunters, Walker more than Graves, but neither of them was what you'd call a gifted actor.
Yeah?
If you watch the movie carefully, Graves' words and body language and facial expressions don't match with the emotional tone of his dialogue. And Clint Walker struggles with Byron's tough guy Mickey Spillane mixed with Ayn Rand philosophical dialogue. This one had a lot of potential, but the casting kind of diminished it. And the production feels like it's rushed, which was kind of the case with many of these TV movies of the week. The 1930s and 1940s and 1950s gave us hundreds of tough guy private eyes, from Sam Spade to Mike Hammer. But in the 1960s and the 70s, we got some different iterations of the gumshoe. We got more compassionate and sensitive people like John D. MacDonald's Travis McGee and Joseph Hanson's Dave Branstetter. And this little interesting anomaly of a movie from 1969, which was a secret pilot for a potential television series. The Monk is based on a story treatment and characters created by Blake Edwards, and his fingerprints are all over it. George Maharis plays Gus Monk, a not-quite private eye living in San Francisco. I tweaked the Wikipedia synopsis of this one just a little bit to get it to make sense. Underworld attorney Leo Barnes, played by William Smithers, hires Gus Monk to safeguard a valuable envelope containing information on a mobster. Monk refuses to look after the envelope until he meets Mrs. Barnes, played by Janet Leigh, after which he agrees to hide it on Barnes's behalf. Barnes is murdered by the gangster Grazenko, or at least people think that he is. He may effect his own death. And Monk becomes involved in the world of Grazenko, played by Carl Betts. And we have the usual thing of gangsters chasing him for the envelope. We get some really nice car chases over the hills in San Francisco, which may well have been influenced by Peter Yates' Bullet. And it's not a bad little television movie. Gus Monk is a cool guy, lives in an apartment with a beer-drinking cat. He helps out with protests and other people he knows, people around town. And one of his friends is a bookie who also runs a dry cleaners and several other businesses. The friend, supposed to be Chinese-American, has the cringy name of Hip Guy, but he's played by Japanese-American actor Jack Su, whose birth name was Goro Suzuki. The cool thing is that Sue and Maharis have a cool rapport and they seem to be having fun. One amongst other friends is a guy called Tinker, played by Jack Albertson, who you remember played Grandpa Joe in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, who's an alcoholic guy that Gus uses kind of as a surveillance technician. As usual with this kind of TV movie, we get a couple of celebrity cameos. We get Joe Besser, who for 2 years was one of the Three Stooges, showing up for a minute. We also get Mary Wicks, who was in any number of comedy movies from the 1940s to the 1970s. It's interesting seeing a 1960s private eye who has a different idea of masculinity than the usual tough guys. Part of this is Blake Edwards' formula for going against that trend, which he displayed in television series like Peter Gunn and Mr. Lucky. But part of it's also George Maharis. He never had to play the tough guy. He played kind of compassionate men, all the way from his Buzz Murdoch in Route 66 onwards. His career would have gone a lot further, except he was arrested a couple of times for public displays of affection, and the suits in the studios really didn't like that. His character, Gus Monk, is a sensitive guy too. When he eventually finds out what's going on and the truth of whether his client faked his own death or not, and who was involved in the cover-up, and his friend Lieutenant Heritage, played by Raymond St. Jakes, arrests all the bad people, Gus feels kind of bummed out about it. At the end of the movie, he hops on a tramp steamer heading for New Orleans, with his cat, of course, to give himself time to get his shit together again. It's a very weird but kind of satisfying ending. Now, I'm not saying The Monk is the best thing since The Maltese Falcon. The plot is pretty formulaic, but like many detective shows that turned out pretty good, they were more about the protagonist's journey than they were about the plot and the crimes. Jim Rockford and Harry O were always at the core of their narratives. From an historic point of view, The Monk's interesting too. The documentary-like San Francisco locations add to the watchability, and the rapport between Maharis and the other actors really showed the potential of this as a TV series. This next one you'll have to see on janky YouTube videos because I haven't been able to find a source of it except as a VHS transfer. Many people who watched The Love War in 1970 remember it fondly. The movie plays a bit like a long episode of The Outer Limits. It's not a Twilight Zone kind of thing, it's more an Outer Limits kind of story. Lloyd Bridges plays Kyle, an alien from a place called Argon. The narrative's a little unclear on whether the aliens are from another planet or just an alternative dimension. We never see any spaceships and it doesn't really matter from a story point of view. Kyle is part of a war party of 3 who have to travel to Piru, California to battle 3 antagonists from Xenon, another alien place. The prize for that battle is Earth. If Argon wins, Earth will be invited into their federation. If Xenon wins, Earth gets conquered. So there's a lot at stake in this small town. On his way to Piru, he takes the bus. Kyle meets a woman called Sandy, played by Angie Dickinson, who is quirky and forthright. Now, Kyle is hundreds of years old, And for the first time in a very long time, he finds himself attracted to a female, and that messes with his head. Kyle and Sandy get off the bus at Pyru, and the battle between the Argonauts and the Xenons begin. Fortunately, both parties have a way of getting rid of dead bodies with little buttons and incinerate corpses in very festive ways. Shooting the movie on location in Pyru, for the most part, gives it an encapsulated feeling where a single place is the venue for potentially world-changing events. And I kind of like that way of doing things in certain science fiction movies. There are lots of little science fiction gimmicks here. There are communicators that shaped like pencils. There are ray guns that look like magic wands. There's a machine for detecting aliens, which is like a painted hockey puck with 2 lights on it. And finally, there are the groovy sunglasses that let the antagonists identify other aliens masquerading as humans. And that last device is used really well in the last moments of the movie. Now, many people remember this movie for the twist ending, but the guts of it's solid too. Lloyd Bridges plays against type as a being who, in modern parlance, is getting in touch with his feelings. And Angie Dickinson, who was hardly ever given any decent roles until she got her series Policewoman in the mid-1970s, is good as Sandy. We also get Daniel Chade Travanti in an early role, and people remember him best from Hill Street Blues. He plays one of the other Argonauts. This is one of those TV movies that deserves a Kino Lorber-style release, a Blu-ray maybe. People who saw it back in the day remember it fondly, and even on reviewing it, the twist ending still packs a punch because I like the 2 characters involved. These old TV movies are better than I remember them being. If you look through the Wikipedia page for ABC Movies of the Week, there are some really solid films there, including Steven Spielberg's Duel, which here in Australia played commercially in cinemas because it was considered that good a movie. There are a lot of movies there that could either be remade successfully now or need to be re-released, maybe in box sets, so the people who haven't seen them can enjoy those movies in a modern context. So that's about it this time around. Thank you very much for watching. Please consider liking, subscribing, hitting the notification bell, and leaving a comment telling me which old ABC Movies of the Week you liked. I've already put something up on the community tab on the channel, which people are already engaging with, so this is a very, very popular idea. So, as always, look after yourselves. You can support the channel, by the way, if you go to patreon.com/paleocinema. Look after yourselves, stay safe, wear a mask, do the jab, do all the stuff you need to do. Watch some good TV movies, watch some bad TV movies. Take care, and I'll catch you next time.